Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Israel and this is Parashat Vayera. He appeared, Genesis 18 to 22, and this one's called Bound. So this parsha picks up where last week's parsha, Lech Lecha, leaves off. Now obviously we couldn't touch on everything last week because there was a lot to cover as there is this week. So sit tight, it's going to be a long one, but it's going to be a good one. So, previously in the book of Genesis, Abram gets a call from God, tells him to go out from where he is and to go until when he tells him to stop. Abram and Sarai descend to Egypt. Abram and Lot separate. Abram frees Lot, the captive, from the four kings. Melchizedek blesses Abram, the covenant of the pieces, Hagar and Ishmael. Abram and Sarai become Abraham and Sarah, and then we have the Covenant of Circumcision. This is where we left off. So, last we saw Abram in the end of last week's Parsha. He was a 99-year-old man who just circumcised himself and at least another 318 of his household men. So now fast forward 3 days, and you can imagine how all the men in the house of Abraham are pretty much out of commission, right? They're bleeding, in pain, general discomfort. But instead of rolling into a ball in the corner of some tent, what does Abraham do? Vayera alav Adonai ba'alonei Mamre, vehu yoshev petach ha'oel kechom hayom. Now the Lord appeared to him in the plains of Mamre, and he was sitting at the entrance of the tent when the day was hot. That's what he was doing. So this verse right here, this is end times prophecy. Another way to read it is, God himself appeared to Abraham because he was sitting at the entrance of the tent. Now, why was he sitting at the entrance of the tent? Because he was looking for souls to save. This is what Abraham was doing. Anyone who passed through the tent of Abraham was said to have left knowing God. So does this mean that Abraham sat down with each and every one of his guests and told them about his wondrous life and all about the creator of the universe? Possibly, but also unlikely. I mean, his tent stretched from Beersheba to Hebron. I don't know if you're familiar with Israel. It's a 60-kilometer span. It's a lot. What's more likely is that all those who passed by from the three continents, right? Asia, Africa, and Europe, because Israel is strategically located that connects all the three continents. So once they entered into the house of Abraham, then they would go seek him out. Now, why is that? Our sages say that Abraham was so wealthy, that every single person who entered into his domain would leave full and satiated, but could stay for as long as they liked, thereby joining the house and the covenant. If they were thirsty, he would water them. If they were hungry, he would feed them. If they were naked, he would clothe them. If they were weary, he would comfort them. And if they were poor, he would fill their pockets with silver and gold. Another way to read this verse is that God was visiting Abraham, who was sick because he was sitting at the entrance of the tent, looking for people to save and serve. What is kechom hayom, the heat of the day? Okay, it was lunchtime. Instead of eating, Abraham was looking for people to feed. But also, that's a different kind of heat we're talking about. Abraham, he understood it. Okay, so the four corners of his tent were rolled up. We discussed this, welcoming people from all sides, from the four corners of the earth. And not only that, while Abraham was sitting, the Lord God humbled himself, and it said that he was standing. Midrash Rabbah says that when the Shekhinah, the glory of God, came, Abraham was on his feet. But God said, no, you sit. Now this will be a sign to your sons, the Midrash says. When they enter into the house of prayer and they say Shema Israel, they will sit, because we say Shema Israel sitting down, and the Shekhinah will stand upon them and cover them. So another way to understand this verse, the Lord appeared to him in front of a tree in Mamre, and he was sitting at the entrance of the tent when the day was hot. Ba'alonei Mamre, right? In the trees of Mamre, or in the tree of Mamre, plains of Mamre would be Arvot Moav. You understand? So it's not the plains of Mamre, because that's not what it says in the Hebrew. It says by the tree of Mamre. But we have a specific place over here. There was one single tree. Now, it's important and interesting to note that when God commanded Abraham to circumcise himself and all his household, he was very hesitant. Now, why was he hesitant? Not necessarily for himself. He asked a few of his friends. Some said, dude, you're 99 years old. What are you doing this to yourself for? And they said, maybe you shouldn't do it. But, you're going to take a knife to your reproductive organ? But because he feared, why did he hesitate? He feared that he was going to chase people away. You understand? Can you imagine people coming into his tent and they dwell there for a bit? They're asking, right, of the holiness of the place. They're basking in it. They're wanting more. Who is this God? Tell us about your God, wanting to be partakers of the covenant of Abraham. When he comes out with a knife and says, okay, you want to be part of it? Drop trow or lift up your robes. This is going to hurt. Yeah, how many people would stay there? You understand? So he was thinking about that because he didn't want people to run off. So just try and imagine the look on people's faces when their host comes out and says, this is what's happening now. And now we know that the first thing is that Abraham cared about people, right? Even more so than him dwelling with the Shekhinah. And he was right by doing this, so we'll see. But then again, that's also why we have a tremendous amount of respect for those who convert into Judaism, because y'all got to go through this as adults, okay? Those who are not in their right mind do this, but rather in a godly mind. See what I'm saying? Okay, so it was only his friend Mamre, as in the trees of Mamre, who advised Abraham to go through with it. And because of this, he was given the honor and the merit of having his name right here written in the Bible at the very place where a depiction of the throne of God would be hinted here right on earth. So Abraham was actually sitting outside of the shade, outside of his tent in the desert, in the heat of the day. This 99-year-old man who had just circumcised his own flesh. By the way, it also says that God had to steady his hand, because who can do that to themselves, for goodness sakes? So God steadies his hand as he made a kosher circumcision. And why did he do this? Abraham believed God. He understood God. He walked with God. He loved God. So God came in the form of a tree to provide shade, shelter, sustenance, and a prophecy of a son. Now, here comes the son. Vaysa einav vayare vehine shlosha anashim nitzavim alav vayere vayeratz likratam mipetach haoel vayishtachu arza. And he lifted his eyes and he saw, right? Vaisa, carried, lifted his eyes and he saw. And behold, 3 men were standing, well, the translation says beside him. Aval alav is literally on top of him, upon him. And he saw, and then he ran towards them from the entrance of the tent, and he prostrated himself to the ground. Okay, so again, this verse, the way I just read it, you understand, it makes no sense. If the men were standing beside him or upon him, then why did he have to run towards them? Why does it say the entrance of the tent again when we establish that he's not even near his tent, that he's out, away from the entrance of his tent? This is going to be explained in verse 4. So let's break this down. Vaisa einav, right? He carried, lifted his eyes. Our sages say very specifically that he looked with his mind's eye. Ein hasechel. Vayera be'ein hasechel. It's crazy what this is. You know, this is where the pagans take this from. Okay, the pineal gland, and you have the eye of Horus and everything. We had it first, okay? So everything else is just a counterfeit. So let's just relax over there with the whole eye thing. Okay, so this is sight beyond sight, what he was given. Vayera vehine. And he saw and behold, meaning, poof, it just happened. Shlosha anashim nitzavim alav. 3 men standing upon him. Vayere. And he saw that these were angels who took the form of men. With the earthly eyes, they look like men, but with his mind's eye, he saw their true form. He saw who they were, and he saw so much more than what is described here. From these words alone, we can understand that Abraham was in the spirit realm at this point. He was in a meditative state. These men were upon him spiritually, yet away from him physically. That's why he had to run towards them. So what it says is they actually began walking towards him, but then they turned away. They were just going to pass him by. So he ran to them and he begged them to come inside. He knew that whoever wanted to come in would come in. Some people didn't. But he knew that they did want to come in. He saw who they were. In the spirit, yet in the flesh, they were off course. So he did his Abrahamic thing, and he went and he did a course correction for those souls out there. Our sages say that these three men were Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Michael, the archangel Michael, Michael, to give the news of a son. Michael, on the Sefirot count, represented Chesed. He always came to give good news. Gabriel, to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. He represented Gevurah, okay, which is the left side of the Sefirah, which is what Isaac represents. And then we have Raphael, as in Lerafel. Rofeh in Hebrew means doctor. Raphael, he came to heal him, representing Tiferet, which is Jacob, as in the balance of those two. Now we're going to get into something just a little bit deeper. We're just going to touch on it a little bit deeper, what he saw. I hope you can dig this with me. Okay, so here we go. There were the three columns of the Sefirot, and their three colors were green, red, and white flames. There's so much written as to what he was shown at the time. I can't share that here, but do your own studying. Okay, so why does it say Petach HaOel, the tent doors, twice no less, right? We have him sitting there at the entrance of the tent in verse 1, and then he ran towards them from the entrance of the tent, verse 2. So Kabbalistically speaking, it says that he will sit, meaning Abraham. Now listen, he will sit at the tent's door, and it will be hinted towards the fullness of Israel. Now what is the fullness of Israel? It's Knesset Israel. This is when all who are Israel will be united and together at the end of time. We also know that the special name of God was not given to the patriarchs, right? They did not know him as Yud He Vav He. This is what God tells Moses. They did not know me like this. They knew me as El Shaddai. Okay, so this is not this. They knew him as El Shaddai, and that's why it had to be said, and he sits at the tent door, and then, of course, they say, Vehaven Zeh. Meaning, if you get it, you get it. So again, I was thinking about it because I really wanted to get it. And my favorite thing to do is to share what I'm able with you over here, whatever I'm permitted, you know? So check this out. Every Jew should have a mezuzah on their front door and in every room in their house, minus the bathroom, okay? So what does it say on your mezuzah? On your mezuzah, it says either Shin or Shaddai. Here, actually. I brought one here. I don't know if you could see it, but this is a mezuzah. It has a shin. Some of them say Shaddai. So what does it stand for? What does Shaddai stand for? It stands for Shomer Delatot Israel, the guardian or the keeper of the doors of Israel. And what does it say inside the mezuzah? You open this up over here, and then there's a scroll inside, and it's the Shema Yisrael, right? So when we see the mezuzah on a doorpost in someone's house, we know that this is a house of a Jew. Or, another way to put it, this house lives a God-fearing man, okay, in an ideal world. So I would venture to say that Abraham was acting as the very first mezuzah. When people walked by his tents, he was hanging outside there. Everything was open. They knew this is the house of the man Abraham, who the Lord favors. And guess what? Everybody's welcome. Now, when you enter through the threshold, you kiss the mezuzah, right? Thereby recognizing who the real master of the house is. Now, if these three came as messengers of God, why didn't they come to him directly? Why did they divert their course last minute? God gave Abraham the opportunity to do a mitzvah right here. Right? Hachnasat olchim. This is what Abraham was known for. He ran after people, begged them to come in. Why? To save their souls. Now let's discuss kechom hayom, in the heat of the day. Why did the Torah mention the time of day? It was the rays of the sun that healed him as he left the shade of the tree to go and serve others. And what was the shade of the tree if not the Shekhinah, the glory of God, personally providing shade from the blistering heat? The reference to the healing sun can be found in Malachi chapter 3. Read Malachi, it's short, but you gotta. We'll just start with verse 1 because that's the first dot. We'll come back to it soon. Malachi, verse 1, chapter 3, verse 1. Behold, I send my angel, Hineni sholach malachi, and he will clear a way before me. And suddenly the Lord whom you seek will come to his temple, and behold, the angel of the covenant whom you desire is coming, says the Lord of hosts. Umalach habrit asher atem chafatzim, hine ba amar Adonai tzvaot. Then we have verses 18 and 20, which read, And you shall return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him who serves God and him who does not serve him. Like we've discussed all throughout the last year, you have two choices in this world. It's God or not God. Those that serve him and those that do not. There is no gray area when it comes to this. For lo. Actually, I'm going to read this in Hebrew, okay? And then I'll read it in English. Listen to these words, especially if you heard the drasha from last week. Ki hine hayom ba bo'er ka tanur. Remember that word, tanur? For lo, the sun comes glowing like a furnace, and all the audacious sinners and all the perpetrators of wickedness will be stubble. And the sun that comes shall burn them up, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch, says the Lord of hosts. And the Son of Mercy shall rise, with healing in its wings, for you who fear my name. Then you will go forth and be fat as fatted calves. In other words, right? Yirei shmi shemesh tzedakah. What is tzedakah? Tzedakah, actually, it's not mercy. Tzedakah is righteousness, the son of righteousness. Umarpeh, marpeh, refuah, Raphael, right? Biknafea, its wings. In other words, the same sun that heals and saves will also be the sun that burns and destroys. It's the same thing. Like the fiery furnace that saved Abraham, consumed Haran, his brother. It was the same fire, was it not? They had to check to see that Haran was actually burnt in there. Otherwise, what? Is the fire broken? No, because this ain't earthly fire. So there's your heat of the day, though it's that day, as in the last day. Psalms 1 says this. Out of the book of Psalms, 150 chapters, this is the very first thing we read. Psalms 1, verse 1. The praises of a man are that he did not follow the counsel of the wicked, neither did he stand in the way of sinners, nor did he sit in the company of scorners. But his desire is the law of the Lord, and his law, and on his law he meditates day and night. He shall be as a tree planted beside streams of water, which bring forth its fruit in its season, and its leaves do not wilt, and whatever he does prospers. Okay, so this is our story right here of the conversation that is to come between God and between Abraham. So that you can say, but he knew they were angels, and that's probably why he went out to greet them, right? But he wasn't sitting in the desert because he was comfortable. He was there simply because he loved God and he knew what he had to do. He didn't know that the angels were going to come. He looked to save just one soul at a time because he understood its significance. He fully understood the value of life. And it's because of this reason that he was who he was. And that once he was circumcised, and the covenant of God filled him and his household, because that's what it was, he circumcised his whole household, only then was his house worthy of hosting angels, i.e., heavenly hosts. These are the archangels we're talking about. So now that I throw all this information at you, let's put together and see what we get, right? So the first three verses in Psalm 1, 2, 3, the praises of man, didn't follow counsel of the wicked, desires the law, and those that follow it, they bring forth its fruit in its season, and its leaves do not wilt, and whatever he does prospers, right? Whatever he does prospers. This is a story of Abraham and his becoming of this tree of life, fusing with it as it is watching over him. For lo, the sun comes, glowing like a furnace. And the sun of mercy shall rise with healings in its wings. The same sun that burnt the wicked will heal and protect the righteous. Behold, I send my angel, the angel of the covenant. So who is this my angel of the Lord? Exodus 23, 20-23. Behold, I am sending an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. הנה אנוכי שולח מלאך לפניך לשומרך בדרך ולהביאך אל המקום אשר הכינותי. Beware of him and obey him. Do not rebel against him, for he will not forgive your transgressions, for my name is with him. For if you hearken to his voice and do all that I say, I will hate your enemies and oppress your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you to the Amorites, the Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, Jebusites, and I will destroy them. Now again, we discussed this. Our sages say that this angel of the Lord is Metatron, the highest of all the messengers of God, who has been given all the authority of the heavens and of the earth. He is called both Lord and messenger, and he is the face of God in this world, or Tron. And so, who is the angel of the covenant which they desire? There were several covenants, right? Each one building upon the next, starting Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, then Joseph, then Moses, Aaron, to David, and then the seed of David. God said in Exodus that Israel spoke correctly when they could not hear from him directly anymore, and so he sent his messenger. This is when they received the first two of the 10 commands. They got flung 7 kilometers away from Mount Sinai. They died. God resurrected them. They had to march back to the mountain. Because when God Almighty speaks to you directly, your soul leaves your body. There's nothing that you could do because God is not a spiritual being. So when you have the master of the universe speaking to you directly, you're dead. He resurrected them twice, and then they said, that's it, Moses. It's all you. And God said, they said, good. But the first covenant, this was with Abraham and the covenant of the pieces, as we discussed last week. Genesis 15:12. Now the sun was ready to set, and a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, and behold, a fright and great darkness was falling upon him. When the sun sets, the world is in darkness. In the end of days, the sun will be no more, and the earth will be in perpetual darkness, spiritually speaking. But then from within the darkness comes the cleansing light, the fire that burns and purifies. Or another way to look at it, order out of chaos. And then we continue reading. Now it came to pass, the sun had set, and it was dark, and behold, a smoking furnace and a firebrand which passed between the parts, between the pieces. On that day the Lord formed a covenant with Abram, saying, to your seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates River. For lo, the sun comes glowing like a fiery furnace, from Malachi 3. Rabbeinu Bachye wrote this: if you attain the knowledge, you will understand that the Shekhinah is revealed here to Abraham from its dwelling place. These 3 angels are hosts, but they come from 4 dwelling places. And so why did he see 3 and not 4? Because every angel has a purpose: mercy, healing, and judgment. That's exactly what happened right now. Mercy was, was Michael, healing was Raphael, and judgment was Gabriel. But the 4th was already revealed to him in the covenant of the pieces. And then, of course, it says, Vehaven zeh, and understand this. Do we understand? How do I simplify this? The 3 angels represented the Sphirot of the patriarchs, but there are 4 pillars which hold up the throne of God, and the 4th was David. Can you dig it? Here are the points. My angel, the angel of the covenant, the fiery furnace, the son of mercy, the son of healing, the righteous one who desires the law, the tree that brings forth good fruit. Just keep all this in mind right now, because the case builds, and we're only in verse 2. Our sages say that one of the things that God showed Abraham were the gates of hell, the very hour that the light will consume all the wicked, but heal all that are of God. And so, what we learn from these 2 verses alone is foreshadowing the very end of days, where Abraham sits outside of the comfort of his blessed household, outside the shade of his tent, outside of Gan Eden, outside in a barren land, in the scorched earth by the gates of hell, protected by God, so that he may grab anyone who is circumcised, bringing them into his tent, into Gan Eden, thereby saving them from certain death or hell. You understand? But what about those who are not circumcised in the flesh or in the heart? Right? What about that? What happens there? Just like God permitted Abraham to see men and angels, or angels in the form of men, rest assured that he can see what is to come of every man, both in the flesh and in the spirit. Okay? It also says when Mashiach comes, he will not be impressed by anyone's outward appearance. He will smell you. Mashiach will smell you. This is where the breath of God came in, and this is where it's going out from your mouth when you die. Mashiach smells every single man. Sounds weird, but that's what it is. Abraham's midah, his attribute, is that of loving kindness, mercy, grace, or chesed on the Sphira chart. And so he gives without measure or without limit. But that's actually an imbalance, as we must use discernment as to who or what or how we give, right? If a friend of yours, let's say if a friend of yours is addicted to, I don't know, crack, let's go with that, right? And they're in pain, what are you going to do? You're going to give them more crack or something? Or if your friend is acting in a very ungodly manner and you allow them to do this, there are no boundaries over there. That's very dangerous. That could put somebody over the edge. So God created the world bringing in the spirit into flesh, and we see that in the trifecta that are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Isaac was to balance Abraham, and then Jacob was a combination of them both. So where am I getting all this stuff from? We discussed this last week, Genesis 2:4. Sorry, not last week. We discussed this last week, but also it's from Genesis 2:4. By the way, if you are just joining us, these teachings are sequential, starting from Parashat Bereshit, so I would recommend that you getting in on that for the sake of clarity. If not, I'm doing my best. The notion that Abraham represents the starting point is further illustrated in the second account of creation, right? We discussed this, which begins with the words, "This is the story of the heavens and the earth when they were created," and the letters of the words and meaning when they were created, behibar'am, permute into a word meaning with Abraham or in Abraham, suggesting that the heavens and the earth were created with the loving kindness of Abraham. Okay? In other words, God did it for him. And another thing that you should know, Sefer HaYetzirah, this white book right over there behind me, the book of creation as we know it, was written by Abraham. And this is where we get all these deep concepts from, but the understanding of these concepts, they just can't be found in the pages of the book. It all depends if you're plugged in or not, because otherwise they'll just be words to you. You won't understand them. So Genesis 2, we read it as a completion of the heavens and the earth, but then it's also correct to read it before the account of creation itself. In other words, what I'm trying to say is this. God began to truly manifest his attributes in the patriarchs, starting with Abraham, and later on, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, and David. These are also the ushpizin that we welcome into the sukkah. And what is the sukkah? The clouds of glory. That's what it represents. All are one, each is unique, and there is no separation. Hakol echad, hakol meyuchad bli perud. These are the words to describe the angel of the Lord, the Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God hovering above the waters. This is King Mashiach, as we had discussed in Parashat Bereshit. So I just want you to understand, why was the world created? For us to know God and for us to choose God. And this can only be done through the tent of Abraham. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you. V'nivrechu becha, they will be blessed through you. Kol mishpachot ha'adama. Genesis 12:3 says, well, that is Genesis 12:3. And this means that only Abraham and his seed have these covenants. And if you would like to partake in them, you must go through Abraham. There's no other way. This is not debatable. This is non-negotiable. This is just the way it is. And I would hope that you can't misinterpret something written so plainly as it is in Genesis 12:3. But then again, we know some people, don't we? So God is not only revealing to us the secrets of creation through our forefathers, but he's also showing us that we already have been connected with him. We just have to go there. So we have the 7 sefirot here on earth. There are 10. We have 7 here on earth, and we see later on that Abraham understands what they are, whereas Moses was all up in the 10. Now verse 4. Please let a little water be taken and bathe your feet and recline under the tree. Yukach na me'at mayim v'rachatzu ragleichem v'hisha'anu tachat ha'etz. Ha is the tree. One tree. There is one single tree from the beginning. Even though it says in the trees of, there's always one tree. And this is just one tree we've been talking about. Abraham started putting the pieces together over here. As he saw them, he started seeing the sefirot. He started seeing the stuff that everything was created by. Of the 3 angels from your dwelling places. Okay, now this is going to give you goosebumps. These 3 angels are seated directly beneath the throne of God in the heavens. This is where they come from. The 3 angels beneath the throne of God in heaven. Now they're here on earth. They came to visit Abraham. And Abraham just placed them tachat ha'etz. What was the tree, if not to the Shekhinah, the throne of God, protecting Abraham? He saw this. He comprehended it. Did you understand what I just said? And just like we are going to judge angels in Psalm 8, what is man that you should remember him, and the Son of Man that you should be mindful of him? Yet you have made him slightly less than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and with majesty. You give him dominion over the work of your hands. You have placed everything beneath his feet. Do you remember in Parashat Vayera when we discussed the death of Moses and how God called out Moses' soul and he says, come, you will be seated right beneath my throne above the angels? This is where Abraham's going to be also. So where do we see this in the Parsha? Verse 8. And he took cream and milk and the calf he had prepared, and he placed them before them, and he was standing over them under the tree, and they ate. Do you understand? Abraham just seated the 3 archangels as they were sitting in heaven, right here on earth, beneath the tree, i.e. the throne of God, and he was standing between them and God, over them. Now I'll tell you something else. It wasn't food that they were eating, because they're archangels. These are angels. What do they need to do with food? It's important to remember that there are always simultaneous multi-dimensional occurrences in the Torah, and of course in the world today, as we always discuss this. Now down here in the earthly realm, we affect what happens in the heavenly realm. This is just a fact. So then we can ask the question, are the 3 angels seated beneath the throne of God because Abraham put them there now, or were they there since creation? What came first, you see? The answer is yes, on both accounts. We saw Abraham in creation. We see him here right now. But we control what happens up there in heaven. So, the answer is yes on both accounts. There's no contradiction. And understand this. That one's mine. You either get it or you don't. I know I'm going a little bit deeper here. Most of this teaching is, I hope you can understand. So in regards to our sages, what they say about this, they say, from here we can see that the scriptures have a dual meaning. They were called men and they were called angels, and they conceal and reveal the truth, which is the same as the serpent and the she-donkey, Bilam, okay? V'hamaskil yavin, and the educated will understand. Are we educated? I'd like to think so. As students of the Torah, we must understand that the Torah is purely spiritual, yet it can only manifest in the physical, which is an anomaly within itself. And since it's purely spiritual, should we truly seek to understand the Word of God, you have to let go of what you think might make sense to you in this world in order for true understanding to occur. That's why it plays particularly with the times, especially in last week's Parsha. We don't know what came first. Later on, you have to read all the extra biblical texts in the Midrash to understand actually what came first. Again, time is just another aspect of God. He created time. He is time. So in other words, you have to rewire your brain so that you can get on the same wavelength as the Creator. Time in the Torah is just another dimension, and it is played with according to the message that God is giving us. In other words, there's a reason for this. Another point on this matter is verse 6. And Abraham hastened to Sarah, and he said, hasten 3 se'eh of meal and fine flour, knead and make cakes. Vayemaher Avraham ha'ohala. Remember ha'ohala, what we discussed in Parashat Noah? Yeah, ha'ohala with the hay, Sarah's tent. It was her tent. Anyway, now, what if I told you that the cakes that Sarah made were actually matzot? Matzahs, Passover, Pesach, because it was the eve of Passover. And you know, Abraham was a fan of the law and all that good stuff. But wait a minute. The Exodus would only happen in 401 years from that point in time, in the future. How is this even possible? Exodus 12:40 says, and the habitation of the children of Israel that they dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. To the day, God spoke to Abraham when he was 70, right? At the Covenant of the Pieces, he was 70 years old. Lech Lecha, he was 75, even though it's written in a reverse order. He was 70 years old. He said, your descendants will be in bondage for 400 years. Isaac was born 30 years later, which means it was a 430-year count-on. From the moment Isaac was born, 400 years to the day. And when did they leave? They left on Erev Pesach. When would Isaac be born? 400 years to the day before that, Erev Pesach. When are the angels showing up? 401 years before that, Erev Pesach. So, these angels came to Abraham on right before Erev Pesach. But again, the event did not yet happen for the command to celebrate the remembrance of this event. So how does this all make sense? We know that the Torah pre-exists the world. This is very simple. What, God didn't know about the Exodus? He planned the Exodus as part of the plan. Everything was written and decreed since creation according to our works and our deeds. I'm going to say that again. You think you don't have free will because God planned it? He planned everything according to our works and according to our deeds. That's what's up. Now, I'd like to ask my Christian friends a question here, okay? We know, in terms that we might understand here today, that Abraham was saved, okay? Or rather, he and God were connected, chibur, chaver, right? Friend, connection. So, if Abraham was saved, was he fulfilling the law in order to be saved? Because then that would be works righteousness, right? Or simply, he did all this, even though he was saved, he did this because he was saved, because he knew God, because he loved God, and he wanted to know God even more, thereby keeping his commands. What did James say, right? Rabbi Yaakov. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and is not a doer, he's like a man observing his natural face in the mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. Got to be consistent too. Check this out. I can't believe this is even in there. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty, the perfect law of freedom, depends what kind of translation you got there, and continues in it, lives it, you understand? And is not forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work. This one will be blessed in what he does. Was Abraham not blessed in everything that he does? Are not all the nations blessed through him? Is he not keeping the perfect law of liberty before he was even commanded to do so? You question this man's heart? Abraham followed the law before it was even given. And you throw away the perfect law of liberty because you think that it was done away with? Think for a moment. God gave you a brain and basic understanding for you to understand these concepts. Does the Word of God have an expiration date? No. And even if you're not sure, which is fine, you're searching, we all are, no problem. Wouldn't you at least prefer to err on the side of everyone holy in the Bible? Right? Everyone holy in the Bible. Like, if I'm wrong, at least I'll do what they're doing. If I'm not sure, at least I'll do what they're doing. Think. How are you going to be blessed through Abraham if you don't do like Abraham? And yes, friends, circumcision's on that list. If you want to partake in the covenants of the circumcision, then partake. They come with covenants. You do this, you get that, okay? If you want a reward system. Listen, you should know. Many have asked me about this. The 7 Noahide laws. These were actually taught by Abraham, first and foremost to everyone who came in his tent, because these are laws of morality. Derech eretz kadma la Torah. Proper moral behavior precedes the Torah. You can't follow the Torah if you don't act like a mensch, like a ben adam, like a decent human being, because then you're a complete hypocrite. This is what it means, the perfect law of freedom, and continues to do so. It doesn't just look and then walks away, because then you're a different person when you come back. So these are the laws of morality that will quite literally save you from ceasing to exist after you die. You understand how important this is? Meaning that if you are a Gentile and you follow these laws while recognizing the God of Israel, God says you're good. But if you have it upon your heart to enter into the tent of Abraham, that's where you get to know God through Abraham. And that's when you begin to follow the perfect law of freedom, not out of fear, but out of love. There are 3 degrees to this. There's fear, there's respect, and there's love. We do things because, God incentivizes, right? When he says, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Shiftecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamuni. The rod and the staff, it's the same stick with a different use. This is what God is. Do we love him? Do we fear him? Do we respect him? We should definitely have all 3. But the highest of these is love. And this is what Abraham is all about. Isaiah 41:8 says, but you, Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, who loved me. God said this about Abraham. Avraham ohavi. God called out Abraham's heart. I, the Lord, search the heart, test the kidneys to give everyone according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. Jeremiah 17:10. The ways, the deeds, the doers, be a doer. Raising your hands and saying hallelujah does nothing if that's all you got. So a person who loves God keeps his commands. According to God, yes sir, just saying. Okay, so these 3 angels, they came to Abraham for much more than news of the birth of his son Isaac in 1 year's time, which would very specifically be Passover. Because Abraham was in a covenant with God, they came to show him the Aleph. What is the Aleph? The Aluf, the Sfirot, the link between the creator of all things, the future, and also the fallen. He saw everything. The link between heaven and earth, and this later on would actually be the ladder of Jacob. Verse 10, and he said, I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, your wife Sarah will have a son. And Sarah heard from the entrance of the tent, and he was behind him. Who is he who said that he will return, right? Was it Michael? Was it Gabriel? Or Raphael? It said Vayomer shov ashuv elecha. Who's he that said this? It couldn't have been any of them. We know that every angel has a specific task. This is what they are. They're extensions of God, okay? He sent out from the throne of glory, and once the job is complete, the angels return. Now, for all intents and purposes, the angels are, like I said, they're an extension of God, and that's why sometimes throughout the Torah you'll see God speaking through specific angels. It'll be the angel of the Lord or the angel, and then he'll speak as if God's speaking directly. Now, there's an angel governing every single aspect of creation, of nature, except for 3 things. And the higher ranking angels, just so you know, they're given the freedom to choose how to execute God's orders. Okay, and that's why there is such a thing as angels rebelling against God. This is a Jewish concept. Rashi discusses this. Many Jews are not familiar with this because they say, no, that's a Christian belief. But again, it's ours. So, yeah. However, these three things, they're exclusively in the hands of the Almighty. And the three things are, 1, childbirth, the ability to give life. 2, the resurrection of the dead, the ability to restore life. And 3, the rain, the ability to sustain life. Okay? God himself he does those things directly. So, who said that I will surely return? The Zohar says that it was the Shekhinah, the glory of God, who was standing by the three angels, who was there when they came. And furthermore, it says that the Shekhinah and the angel of the covenant are actually one and the same. See what I'm saying? Verses 16 and 17. And the men arose from there, and they looked upon Sodom, and Abraham went with them to escort them. Look what the Hebrew says. Vayakumu misham ha'anashim, they're still men, because he sees them as men. Vayashkifu al pnei Sodom, ve'Avraham holech imam leshalcham. What is shalcham? What is shlach? Send off. And the Lord said, shall I conceal from Abraham that I am doing? We see that they are referred to as men over here, and they are being escorted by Abraham. But what it actually says, like I just showed you in the Hebrew, it says he sent them off. Not necessarily walked them off, he sent them off. He was in a place of authority over here. He was dwelling with the Shekhinah, which he left to run and serve others, and yet the Shekhinah escorted Abraham as he escorted others to and fro. And that is why it's said that God said, I just revealed the creation and the future to Abraham, right? Verse 18, and Abraham will become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the world will be blessed in him. What? I'm not going to tell him what's about to happen? Of course I'm going to tell him what's about to happen. Why am I going to tell him about what's about to happen? Because I know what he's going to do, and I know what he's going to say. But now you're going to know what he's going to do, and you're going to know what he's going to say. And you're about to see just why I chose this man to carry my name. You're about to see what a true tzaddik looks like. For I have known him, verse 19, for I have known him because he commands his sons and his household after him, that they should keep the way of the Lord, to perform righteousness and justice, in order that the Lord bring upon Abraham that which he spoke concerning him. I cannot stress this enough. Just read it for yourselves, even in the English. God is speaking of Abraham's life and his deeds in the past, in the present, and in the future. There is no time now. And he knows Abraham. He knows Abraham. There will be no departing for him or his household. Verse 22. And the men turned from there, and they went to Sodom, and Abraham was still standing before the Lord. In other words, all this time, the Lord, God, was present with Abraham. Now we also see that in the presence of Abraham, these three angels are called Ish, or Anashim, men, not Malachim. And then also it says, Vayishkifu, Vayifnu misham Anashim, Vayilchu Sodoma, V'Avram odenu omed lifnei Adonai, right? So why does it say Sodoma? Why is the hay? We learned this way long time ago about the hay at the end of a place. What is hay? Hay represents God. Why is it not just Sdom and Stoma? Because the hay means that there is a godly purpose over there. Now the godly purpose was Lot and his daughters, who would later produce the Moabites and the Ammonites. Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David, the messianic line, was of the Moabites. But it said that the only reason that God had mercy on them was because of Abraham and his pleading with the Lord for any righteous man to be saved. Also, another thing you should know, why Abraham kept on referring to Lot as his brother is because Lot was a son of Haran who burnt up in the fire that Abraham was saved from. And therefore, he looked at Lot, his offspring, as if his own brother. You understand? He was honoring his brother by taking care of his son and calling him a brother. Okay. Plus, it's good standing to be a brother of Abraham. Now, Lot was not a righteous man. And that's why in chapter 19, verse 1, it says, And the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting there at the gate, and Lot saw and arose towards them, and he prostrated himself on his face to the ground. Okay, so first of all, now it says angels. Abraham says people, because Lot saw angels. Otherwise, he would not have run towards them and said, Please come in. He wasn't a righteous dude. The angels now came in the dark, Sodoma, because they were on a mission from Gad. Because Abraham's shield, his reach extended way beyond his tent. He could send them the holy messengers, the angels, to give and to give a message, which in this case is to save lives, so that they come into the house. And this is where they get in trouble, according to Chazal. Now, here's what I meant when I said that even the higher angels, they have slightly, they have free will. They try not to deviate, but God gives them the freedom to execute his order. Look at what they say in verse 13. For we are destroying this place, because their cry has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Ki mashchitim anachnu et hamakom hazeh, ki gadla tza'akatam et pnei Adonai, vayishlachenu Adonai leshachta. Our sages say that because they said that they were first destroying the place, and not God, they received punishment. That's right. Michael and Gabriel messed up right here. Now, what was the punishment? They were grounded for 138 years. Until when? Until Jacob had his dream of the ladder, of the angels going up and down, and the angels going up were Michael and Gabriel, who were grounded here on earth for that entire duration. The higher up you get, the higher up you are, every wrong move, no matter how small or innocent, has tremendous implications. There's something else you need to understand. This might upset a lot of people, but if you think about it, it's the truth. God speaks of punishment and reward, but the deeper you learn, you understand there is no such thing as punishment or reward. It just is. There are facts, right? It's like the punishment if you get burned. So if there's a fire and if you stick your hand in the fire, is that a punishment? Sure, it's your punishment for sticking your hand in the fire, but it just is. You understand? Just like if you do something good, then good things happen to you as a result. It's like it's a formula. That's why there's logic behind creation. It could be broken down into numbers. And Abraham fully understood that after he was circumcised. And you'll see even Jacob was like a super genius. He could manipulate everything in nature. Anyway, another example of this is actually pertaining to Melchizedek. So, what happened to Melchizedek? Who is Melchizedek? Or Melchizedek, however you like to refer to him. Melchizedek melech shalem. U'Melchizedek melech shalem, hotzi lechem v'yayin, v'hu kohen le'el elyon. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was a priest to the Most High God. I'm going to keep reading 2 verses. Tell me what's wrong here, based on what I just told you about the angels. And he blessed him, and he said, Blessed be Abram to the Most High God, who possesses heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, who has delivered your adversaries into your hand. And he gave him a tithe from all. Long story short, Melchizedek was Shem, okay, as in the son of Noah. Abraham just killed off his offspring to defeat the 4 kings. And he was cool with that because they did not follow the Lord. Nevertheless, he blessed Abraham before he blessed God. As a result, the kingship of Melchizedek was removed from Shem because Melchizedek is just a title, just like Yitro. Yitro is not the name of Yitro, who was, what was his name? His name was Reuel, okay? Yitro was just a title. It's like the title of a priest or something. And it was, so this kingdom, the kingship of Melchizedek was given to Abraham and then to his offspring, ultimately resting upon the head of King Mashiach, who will be the king of Shalem, as in Yerushalem, Jerusalem. You understand? Okay, so on to Sodom. Verses 23 and 24. The sun came out upon the earth. Oh, look, here we go with another sun came out upon the earth. And Lot came to Tzo'ara. Again, the English says Zoar, but the Hebrew says Tzo'ara. Why Tzo'ara? Because where they're going, they're about to engage and make a baby with Lot and his daughters, and produce Moab, and then later on the Davidic line. So there was a purpose. And the Lord caused to rain down upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord from heaven. Okay, now, this is the same sun, Yatsa al haaretz, not up, but out. It says the sun came out upon the earth. That's what the English says. Hashemesh Yatsa al haaretz. It came out upon the earth. This is not sunrise. Why is this not sunrise? When did the angels arrive? At night. This happened at night. We know this because Abraham woke up the next morning. He woke up at dawn and he saw that there was smoke. It had already been done. You see, God judges the nations at night while they sleep, and Israel during the day while they're doing mitzvot, or while we should be doing mitzvot. And this fire consumed all things. And the funny thing is, verse 29, and it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham. And he sent Lot out of the midst of the destruction when he overturned the cities in which Lot had dwelt. So, first, God did not remember Lot, he remembered Abraham, which is why Lot was saved. And second, isn't that what the angels were supposed to do? Get Lot out of there? Did God forget? And third, didn't this already happen? They had to get clear before, it rained fire and brimstone. So our sages say that Abraham knew that the three men that came to see him, they were sent from the foundations of the world. This was God's plan from the beginning. This is predestined outside of space and time. Now, do you realize what Abraham is realizing here? What he has been shown, what he has seen? There were two accounts of creation, and the second one was for Abraham, and he knew this. Chapter 21. It's been 1 year. It's Passover. And the Lord remembered Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had spoken. And Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Mazal Tov, the son of promise, is born. God turned a 90-year-old woman into a young woman. When Sarah gave birth, all the barren women in their house conceived. All the deaf could hear, all the blind could see, and all the mute could speak. And the boy looked exactly like his father. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. What happened over here is bar mitzvah time. Isaac's now 13 years old, and Abraham throws an insane party. And all the great kings of the land, they were there. Let's see, who's on the guest list? We got Og Melech HaBashan, right? The giant. We got the giant that Moses would later on take out. He was a pre-flood giant, as we discussed. And in fact, 31 out of the 62, or 31 or 62, depending who you ask, Amorite kings that Joshua would later on defeat were all at this party. Every major player in the world at the time was in Abraham's tent at that point. But wait, I thought you said that anyone who comes through the house of Abraham knew God. Well, these were his buddies, okay? Og fought alongside him in the battle to free Lot. What happened over there? There are even interpretations that say that Og was Eliezer, because it said that Abraham took 300, he and 318 of his servants went. 318 is also the gematria of Eliezer. So it was just Abraham, Eliezer, and the Midrash says that he picked up sand, and he threw sand, and every grain of sand turned into an arrow, and every arrow killed an enemy. In other words, he was controlling nature, essentially, because he knew how to do that. So what happened over here? Abraham's chesed, his grace, went unchecked. This is what we discussed before. He would give and give and give without limit. That's where Isaac comes in to balance out the loving kindness with judgment. Abraham didn't turn anyone away. People were free to come and go as they pleased. That's why he was heartbroken. When Sarah told him to get rid of Ishmael, his son, God even told him, listen to your wife. He wasn't going to do it. God said, even though it was a mistake on Sarah's part. Why? First of all, look what Ishmael would become. God says in the Torah, he will be a wild ass of a man, and he will be at war with his neighbors and with his brothers. Behold, look at look at Islam today. Look at the Arab nation today. They are at war with everybody and amongst themselves. So a lot of turmoil came from that. Nevertheless, they are also used in the end of days. Now, let's fast forward 24 years. Please turn to Genesis 22. ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים נישא את אברהם, ויאמר אליו אברהם, ויאמר הנני. And it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham. And he said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Please take your son, your only son, whom you love, yea, Isaac, and go away to the land of Moriah, and bring him up there for a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. And it came to pass after these things. What things? The 9 previous trials of Abraham. And they were Lech Lecha, the famine in the land and the descent to Egypt, when Sarah was taken to Pharaoh's house, the battle against the 4 kings, taking Hagar as a wife, the covenant of circumcision, taking Sarah to the house of Avimelech, sending off Hagar, and sending off Ishmael. Now, some also say that the first one was actually the fiery furnace. That's where it started, and not the one where Sarah went to Pharaoh's house, because Abraham actually messed up on that one. Which, incidentally, is also why it happened in Egypt where Abraham messed up, and that's why Egypt was the place that the descendants of Abraham would eventually be held in bondage. But anyway, God said, Please take your son. But God, I got 2 sons. You're only one. I only have one from each woman. Okay, whom you love? I love them both, obviously. Take Isaac. Okay, take him where? Go away to the land of Moriah, go up on a hill over there, and then, sacrifice him to me, where I'll tell you. I'm sorry, what now? Okay, so this is the first time in the Torah that the word love is mentioned. Asher ahavta, that you love. First time. Now, our sages say that there are 3 levels of love. And they give examples, they give mashalim, right? 1, he who loves the king, and from within this love would tell of his greatness and sing his praises all day, every day, to everyone, but wouldn't necessarily take out of his own pocket for the king. 2, he who loves the king more than the first guy would always sing his praises and give all of his money to the king, but would not give his own life. And he who would sing praises, 3, he who would sing praises, give all his money and his own life. And Abraham was the 3rd, right? He had all 3. So we know now, again, if you're just joining us, we'll catch you up on this, but we know that the ultimate emissary, speaking of God, he was the ultimate emissary, speaking of God wherever he went, that he was a God magnet. We know that he would build tents of study to praise God, and he gave an abundance without limit to anyone who was in need. Anyone. But where did Abraham give his life? Okay. If you were fortunate enough to join us last week, we discussed that when Abraham was 50 years old, he was tossed into a flaming furnace by Nimrod for openly serving the creator of all things and refusing to bow down to idols. You see, Abraham was very familiar with fiery furnaces, as he is protected over and over. And this is why I mentioned earlier in the book of Isaiah that God said, Avraham ohavi, Abraham who loved me. Because he loved Isaac, he loved me. You'll see. His love for God was complete, and it even ascended his completion. In other words, every person has a potential to fulfill. Abraham exceeded his potential. Now let's take a look at just how significant his love was for God. In order to somewhat grasp just how much Abraham loved God, again, these are God's words. God said, yep, that guy loved me. That's how I know it. This guy's a tzaddik, this guy's a servant, that guy loved me. Let's figure out how much he loved him according to God. We must understand just how much he loved his son Isaac. That's going to be the parameter of how we're going to understand, because it has to be comparatively speaking. According to our sages, Abraham would have died 100 times for Isaac, but that's nothing. Isaac was himself a supernatural anomaly. And this entire story and event, which we take at face value, is so much more than what it is. Wherever we've heard that a 100-year man and a 90-year-old woman who had every physical possession, no shortage of anything, fame and fortune, were not complete without this son. Abraham loved Isaac before he was even born. God promised it to him. On the day of his birth, this love would multiply. On the day of his circumcision, this already multiplied love would multiply even more. On the day of his bar mitzvah, it would have multiplied beyond measure. And when Abraham saw that Isaac would differentiate between good and evil, would know the difference between good and evil, and by the way, we're going to see this mirroring between Yaakov and Yosef, because just like the connection between Abraham and Isaac, it was Ve'ele Toldot Yaakov Yosef, their names are also connected. Jacob recognized in Joseph the fact that he was able to differentiate between good and evil. We'll see that later on. In any case, Abraham saw that Isaac would be able to differentiate between good and evil and follow in his footsteps, growing and becoming a man of God. And as Isaac approached age 40, he was 37 during this time. As he approached age 40, why is age 40 so significant? Because it is said that this is a time of the man's brain, so to speak, fully develops, and only now can he begin to unlock his full potential. So this is when Abraham saw everything in Isaac, especially the word of God, as in God's promise to him. Now take all that and ask the man, please, with your own hands, kill your son. But Abraham was so complete in his faith that he believed that his love for doing the will of God would surpass his love for his son Isaac. Do you understand? I cannot comprehend this. I don't know that anyone can, but it's a good thing that he did it so we wouldn't have to. Now again, the scriptures pointed out just how great his love was, especially since this is where love is first introduced to the Torah. And Abraham arose early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey, and he took his 2 young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split wood for a burnt offering, and he arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Vayashkem Avraham b'boker, ויחבוש את חמורו, ויקח את 2 נעריו איתו, ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עצי עולה, ויקם וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. Look at all these actions and these deeds that Abraham is doing on his own to get the job done. Just like every morning, Abraham arose early to worship God. He prayed in the morning. In fact, Shacharit, Tikkun Shacharit, we give it to the merit of Abraham. Mincha is for Yitzchak, and Arvit is for Yaakov. This time, though, he saddled his own donkey. He chopped his own wood, for there might not have been trees where God would lead him. And he took Eliezer and Ishmael with him. Now on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes, and he saw the place from afar. Bayom hashlishi vayisa Avraham et einav, vayera et hamakom merachok. So there's a complete backstory to this. A lot of it could be found in the book of Jasher. I'm going to go kind of back and forth. I'll tell you some things that stood out to me. Up until the Akedah, from the time that Abraham and Isaac were walking there, the Satan, and again it says, just like it said in Midrash Rabbah by the death of Moses, Samael, who is the Satan, he came against Abraham and Isaac several times. The first was to Abraham in the form of an old man with a humble and contrite spirit. He could turn into whatever he wanted. The second was to Isaac in the form of a young man with a humble and contrite spirit. The third was to all 4 of them as a gushing river in the form of a flash flood. The fourth was right before Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, and the 5th was as the ram was coming to Abraham. The thicket that caught the ram's horns, that was actually the Satan, because the ram, which was created in Genesis, which we discussed in Genesis, one of the 10 things created from the creation of the world, it was made for that purpose, so he stopped him from coming. Now, Satan, Hasatan, used everything to try and sway their hearts, trying and causing doubt, even just for a moment. You see, even if they would have gone through with it, but with the slightest doubt in their hearts, it all would have been for nothing. And what would have happened as a result? There would be no covenant. The world would have been destroyed because there'd be no hope. He would say things like, how could you do this to your son? When he came to Abraham, came to Isaac, he said, how could you do this to your mother? How could you do this to your wife? And so on. Abraham rebuked him, and he fled. On the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place from afar. Compared to 18:2, and he lifted his eyes and he saw, and behold, 3 men were standing upon him. Vaysa Avram et einav vayera, vaysa einav vayera. It's the same thing. What did he see? How did he see? He did not see things that were here. So we see that he's definitely seeing things, and in 3s, no doubt, on the third day he saw 3 men, and so on and so forth. He saw the place from afar. What exactly did he see? So this is from Jasher. You could read this as well. And on the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place at a distance which God had told him of. And a pillar of fire appearing to him that reached from earth to heaven, and a cloud of glory upon the mountain. And the glory of the Lord was seen in the cloud. And Abraham said to Isaac, my son, do you see in that mountain which we perceive at a distance, that which I see upon it? He didn't say what. He goes, do you see something there? And Isaac answered and said unto his father, I see, and lo, a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of the Lord is seen upon the cloud. Now, by the way, you guys want to go back a couple months and check out the video, The City of David. My brother Levi gave us a tour, and we actually stood at the place where it was most likely on the journey from where Abraham came from, and that's where he saw the mountain from afar. So if you go to the City of David video, you'll see exactly where he was looking at. Moving along. And Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Lord for a burnt offering. So after this, Abraham asked Ishmael and Eliezer if they saw anything. And they saw, we see mountains. That's all they saw. So they said, okay, you stay here with the donkey. Now, Chazal, to put it mildly, our sages, to put it mildly, they said, if you can't see the Lord, your place is right here with the donkey. Now, this mountain, of course, is Mount Moriah. This mountain had a very particular smell. We've discussed this as well. It smelled like cinnamon. Now, to add more to the increasingly difficult moment that would be the sacrificing of Isaac by his loving father Abraham, we can ask, why was it a 3-day walk? Why did they have to walk for 3 whole days? This is one-on-one time, father and son. Okay, the other 2 were walking in the back. And 2, this gave Abraham enough time to ponder on what was going to happen. So he didn't rush into anything. He had to sit and marinate with him for a while. As he's walking with the son, he goes, I'm about to kill this kid right now. I mean, not for no reason, in the name of God, for the sake of God, but these are our last days together. He didn't know it would be 3 days. God could have stopped him any time, but it was 3 days, which means this was enough time. We also see, let's say, Jonah being in the belly of the whale for 3 days. So, when it came time and it was good and it was right, that's exactly the time that they got there and they saw what they needed to see. So, when in verse 5 it said, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go yonder, and we will prostrate ourselves and return to you. Va'ani ve'hanar nelecha ad ko, ve'nishtachave, ve'nashuva elechem. Nashuva, return, lashuv, right, to you. Now, was Abraham lying? You cannot speak falsely, right? Abraham was not a liar. He just said, we will return to you. Think about this. Bereshit Rabbah very specifically states that not only would Isaac not come back alive, but Abraham as well, unless, in other words, they both would have died unless they were both going wholeheartedly to prostrate themselves before the Lord. In other words, if they do that, then they move on to the next stage, if you will. And if Abraham would not have come back, there would be no Geulah, there would be no redemption. All hope would have been lost. Or in other words, even though this was a test, it wasn't necessarily that Abraham believed that Isaac would have been raised from the dead right then and there. See what I'm saying? He knew about the resurrection of the dead. He believed that Isaac would have been resurrected from the dead but not necessarily at that point in time. Because why? Because that would have seriously taken off from the burden of this trial. If he knew for a fact, even though as a painful act as it would have been, slit his son's throat and lit him up on fire, and then poof, he came back to life, that would have taken away from the trial, right? So when he says, we'll come back to you, meaning in the end of days we would come back to you, because Abraham was no liar. The unfathomable faith that this man had is unbelievable. This goes to show us that prostrating ourselves before God is what brings us closer to God. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה וישם על יצחק. And Abraham took the wood from the burnt offering and he placed it upon his son Isaac. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife, and they both went together. האש ואת המאכלת. Now Midrash Rabbah uses very particular language as to the description of how the wood is placed on Isaac. Apparently, there is an importance and a significance how the wood was placed upon him. This is what they say, and I quote, "Kazeh shehu to'en tsuluvo bektefo," like it is across his shoulders. So he's carrying the beam like this. For Abraham placed it like this specifically upon his son for the sake of kindness to his soul. Now the fascinating part in this is that not necessarily what it says, but rather what it doesn't say. Because this is all it says about it. Okay? In other words, there's something more to look at here, but that's all they discuss. So moving along, right? וَيِكَחْ بَيَدُו את האש ואת המאכלת. He took in his hands the fire and the knife. Now Rabbi Hanina asked the question that if we read the Hebrew, we should all ask. Why does it say ma'achelet and not sakin? Sakin is knife. I don't know what a ma'achelet is. That's not in modern day Hebrew. Now he says this is a specific knife. Mechasheret achalim, makes the consumption kosher. In other words, it makes a tikkun, a rectification for the food, for the soul. This is for all the generations to come. Every single detail, every word, every letter is significant here. This is called the binding of Isaac. We take it at face value that he's just bound, that that's all it means. But it's a lot more than that, obviously. So, who is Isaac bound to? Let's read the exchange from the Midrash. Now, this is heartbreaking yet joyous. Last conversations between a loving father and his only son, who he loved. Take your son, your only son, who you loved, Isaac. And when they were going along, Isaac said to his father, "Behold, I see here the fire and the wood, and where is the lamb that is to be burnt, a burnt offering before the Lord?" And Abraham answered his son Isaac, saying, "The Lord has made choice of thee, my son, to be a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb." And Isaac said unto his father, "I will do all that the Lord spoke to thee with joy and with cheerfulness of heart." God didn't speak to Isaac. Isaac knew none of this, but he believed his father. And Abraham again said unto Isaac his son, "Is there in thy heart any thought or counsel concerning this, which is not proper? Tell me, my son, I pray thee. O my son, conceal it not from me." And Isaac answered his father Abraham and said unto him, "O my father, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is nothing in my heart to cause me to deviate either to the right or to the left from the word that he has spoken to thee again. Neither limb nor muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there in my heart any thought or evil counsel concerning this. But I am of joyful and cheerful heart in this matter, and I say, Blessed is the Lord, who has this day chosen me to be a burnt offering before him." And Abraham greatly rejoiced at the words of Isaac, and they went and they came together to the place that the Lord had spoken of. Now again, this together is not only physically, but it's one in spirit. And Abraham approached to build the altar in that place, and Abraham was weeping. And Isaac took stones and mortar until they had finished building the altar. And Abraham took the wood and placed it upon the altar which he had built. And he took his son Isaac and bound him. in order to place him upon the wood which was upon the altar, to slay him for a burnt offering before the Lord. And Isaac said to his father, listen to this kid, he's 37. Isaac said to his father, bind me securely, and then place me upon the altar, lest I should turn and move, and break loose from the force of the knife upon my flesh, and therefore profane the burnt offering. And Abraham did so. And Isaac still said to his father, O my father, when thou shalt have slain me and burnt me for an offering, take with thee that which shall remain of my ashes, to bring to Sarah my mother, and say to her, this is the sweet-smelling savor of Isaac. But do not tell her this if she should sit near a well or in a high place, lest she would cast her soul after me and die. And Abraham heard the words of Isaac, and he lifted his voice and wept when Isaac spake these words. And Abraham's tear gushed down upon Isaac his son. And Isaac wept bitterly. And he said to his father, hasten thou, O my father, and do with me the will of the Lord our God, as he had commanded thee. And the hearts of Abraham and Isaac rejoiced at this thing which the Lord had commanded them. But the eye wept bitterly, whilst the heart rejoiced. Oh, this is poetry. And Abraham bound his son Isaac, and placed him on the altar upon the wood. And Isaac stretched forth his neck, right here, upon the altar before his father. And Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife and to slay his son as a burnt offering before the Lord. At that time, the angels of mercy came before the Lord and spake to him concerning Isaac, saying, O Lord, thou art a merciful and compassionate king over all that thou art, that thou art hast created in heaven and earth, and thou supportest them all. Give therefore ransom and redemption instead of thy servant Isaac, and pity and have compassion upon Abraham and Isaac his son, who are this day performing thy commands. Hast thou seen, O Lord, how Isaac the son of Abraham thy servant is bound down to the slaughter like an animal? Now therefore let thy pity be roused for them, O Lord. And at that time the Lord appeared to Abraham, and called to him from heaven, and said unto him, Lay not thine hand upon thy lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God in performing this act, and in not withholding thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted his eyes, and he saw, again, lifting the eyes, and saw, and behold, a ram was caught in a thicket by his horns. That was the ram which the Lord God had created in the earth in the day that he made earth and heaven. For the Lord had prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac. And this ram was advancing to Abraham when Satan caught hold of him and entangled his horns in the thicket, that he might not advance to Abraham, in order that Abraham might not slay his son. It's a last-ditch effort. And Abraham, seeing the ram advancing to him and Satan withholding him, Abraham saw angels. He saw the angels. He saw the Satan. He saw it. He saw through everything. And Abraham, seeing the ram advancing to him and Satan withholding him, fetched him and brought him before the altar. And he loosened his son Isaac from his binding, and he put the ram in his stead. And Abraham killed the ram upon the altar and brought it up as an offering in the place of his son Isaac. And Abraham sprinkled the blood of the ram upon the altar, and he exclaimed and said, proclamation, this is in the place of my son Isaac. And may this be considered this day as the blood of my son before the Lord. And all that Abraham did on this occasion by the altar, he would exclaim and say, this is in the room of my son, and may it this day be considered before the Lord in the place of my son. And Abraham finished the whole of the service by the altar, and the service was accepted before the Lord, and was accounted as if it had been Isaac. And the Lord blessed Abraham and his seed on that day. Whew, yes, he did. Remember what we discussed last week? that doesn't say Isaac, sorry, 2 weeks ago on Parashat Noah, it does not say Isaac, Isaac twice, because at this point, both Isaac's souls, his earthly and heavenly, went up, and the only thing that came back was his earthly soul, because his spiritual soul was gone. Sorry, the other order. His earthly soul came back, and his spiritual soul was in heaven. That's why he was almost detached from this world after that, because he was like a walking dead man. So, gratitude to our Heavenly Father, thank you very much, for creating such a man who would pass this trial so that his seed, us, would never have to go through something like that. So, who is Isaac bound to? See, when we see the word says, and Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, this is in verse 7 from the Parsha, Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham aviv. Did you understand that? And Isaac said to Abraham his father, and he said, my father, Vayomer Avi, Vayomer Hineni bni. My father, and he said, here I am, my son. And Abraham said, God will provide himself for the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And they both went together. Vayilchu shnehem yachdav, yachdav, or yachdav, together. The two of them went together as one mind, one heart, with one single purpose and focus. Abraham could not have completed this alone, not without Isaac. Isaac was bound to his father Abraham, and Abraham, his father, was bound to God. This is how it works. Do you want to partake in the blessings of Abraham? You got to bind yourself through the seed of Abraham. And gratitude to Abraham and to Isaac, who were bound to one another in the spirit and in the flesh, who loved one another more than life itself, and yet their love for the Creator and His will surpassed that which was immeasurable. This solidified the seed of Abraham for all of eternity. Now, when we read these stories and we think that they're so far removed from us, think again. Remember how we discussed earlier that the Satan can shapeshift, right? Just like angels taking on the form of men, Satan taking on the form of the serpent, of the river, of a young man, of an old man. So Satan's last-ditch attempt at derailing Abraham was when he took the form of the Sevach, which is translated as a tree or a bush or a thicket. Sevach. ויסב מתנה וירא, והנה איל אחר נאחז בסבך בקרניו, in his horns. This ram, like we said, was created on one of the 10 things created on the 6 days of creation, in the 6 days of creation. It was specifically created for this specific moment. Now, this symbolizes our Geulah, our redemption. How so? This is why we read on Rosh Hashanah. This is why we read in Rosh Hashanah to blow the to Kaba Shofar Gadol Echelotenu. We actually read it 3 times a day in the Shmoneh Esrei. On Rosh Hashanah, we blow the small shofar. At the end of days, we're going to blow the large shofar, the Shofar Gadol. So this ram actually had 2 horns, a smaller one for every year of Rosh Hashanah, and a large one for the time of the end. Now, the word sevach means tangled, the thicket. In Hebrew, it means tangled, lehistabech, which is another form of binding. This also makes up the word listabech, which means trouble or to be confused. Now, how many of us here get in trouble, get confused, get tangled, and get caught up in this world and all the troubles therein, especially when we seek and search with pure hearts to do the will of God? If you're going to do a mitzvah and the will of God, you have no idea how many troubles you're going to have along the way. They're there on purpose, by design. What do you do with them? What did Abraham do? First, he lifted his eyes and he saw. He looked at God. God showed him what was what. This is why then he went. He took the initiative and he stretched out his hand and he grabbed that ram. And the trouble was no more. He saw the troubles that Israel would have to go through, from exile to exile, from persecution to persecution, from inquisition to Holocaust, from troubles to troubles, until the final Geulah came. He saw the resurrection and destruction of the temples. in the very spot that they were standing. In fact, they were standing in the place of the Kodesh Kodashim right then and there. That's where that was the gateway to heaven. Abraham saw the creation of Adam as well in that very same spot, the Holy of Holies. And that's how he could write the book of creation, because he knew it all. And you want to know what Isaac saw? The Midrash says that upon the altar, Isaac would see a lion, and this would be the lion of God. And this is called Pachad Yitzchak. That's why God said, "Now I know that you fear the Lord." He's talking to Abraham and Isaac. "As for you, Abraham, I've always known you and have always loved you. I swear by my name, I shall not try you or your descendants like this ever again." And it is because Abraham so loved God, the creator of the world, that he gave him his son, his only son, whom he loved, Isaac. That after all the confusion, the troubles, the persecution, and the exiles, that we are still here. Here we are from way back when. In that very spot where smoke and a pillar of fire were rising to the heavens was the same place where God had formed Adam. Do you understand what that place is? And what's sitting there today? An abomination that causes desolation. And Abraham named that place, "The Lord will see," as it is said to this day, on the mountain, the Lord will be seen. This is a prophecy yet to be fulfilled. Vayikra Avraham Shem Hamakom Hahu Adonai Yireh Asher Yomar Hayom Bahar Adonai Yireh. God sees all. Have no fear, though it may seem from the outside that the eye weeps bitterly. Know this, when we serve God, even among chaos and confusion, the heart rejoices. Look at all the trouble that Israel has been through. Abraham saw angels and demons, Satan and Mashiach, heaven and hell, creation and destruction, life and death. And it all gave him joy. For he loved God so much that he was given the sight beyond sight, that he could see God and all of his creation. And it was because he loved God that God chose to bind himself to Abraham and his descendants for all of eternity. So that's it for this one. I know it was a long one. I hope you enjoyed this teaching. I sure did. In any case, as always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.